For several days, the situation in the Middle East has been quiet. There have been ongoing talks, and it seemed like peace was within reach after the devastation caused by Operation Epic Fury. But if there's one thing clear about this war, it's that everything can change quickly. Suddenly the talks stopped, and now the U.S. is going to enforce a powerful naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, a move that turned the situation against Iran and took away one of their strongest cards. On April 12, U.S. President Donald Trump changed the direction of the war. One day it seemed like we were heading towards peace. The next, everything completely changed. He announced that the U.S. would establish a naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. And at the same time, he also said that they would destroy Iran's remaining capabilities. This operation has a broad scope. Any ship that tries to enter or leave the strait will be intercepted. Even ships that have paid tolls to Iran for safe passage will not be allowed through. They will be stopped and not allowed to continue their journey. That is the basic plan. And if the reports are true, it means even ships from Gulf nations that are allies of the U.S. will be affected. This will have a big impact. It's like the U.S. used Iran's own tactics against it. But at the same time, this could have a huge impact on the whole world. But before that, we need to answer a question. How did we end up in this situation? But before we start, don't forget to like this video. This is a big deal for us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. 5 days before Trump's announcement, the U.S. and Iran were still talking. There was a temporary ceasefire for 2 weeks, and Iran said they would open the Strait of Hormuz while that agreement was in effect. Pakistan also came in as a mediator between the two sides. At the last moment, it seemed they were able to stop the U.S. plan to attack Iran's power facilities and bridges. But even though the situation seems to be calming down, problems are starting to emerge. One of these is the 10-point plan given by the U.S. and Israel to Iran. In fact, 2 different versions of this have spread, and many people have started to ask questions. Is Iran ready to give up what the U.S. and Israel want in order to end the war? Their uranium enrichment? And that's where everything went wrong. In the end, Iran's nuclear program was the reason why the peace talks fell apart. And there you have it, as Trump said in his post on April 12. The talks went well. Many things were agreed upon. But the most important point, the nuclear issue, was not. He added that the United States Navy would immediately begin the process of blockading all ships entering or leaving the Strait of Hormuz. The blockade was not immediately implemented, but the direction was clear. Iran refused to comply with the demands of the U.S. So America's response was to act on its own to control the situation. In the same statement, Trump issued a threat. He said that any Iranian force that fires at U.S. ships will be destroyed. He also pointed out that many Iranian leaders were killed because they refused to stop their nuclear ambitions. In another post, he said that Iran did not fulfill its promise to open the Strait of Hormuz. According to him, this caused fear, chaos, and problems in many countries around the world. This may be true, but that's not the only reason why the talks failed. There were other things that made the situation worse. One of these was what Israel did. Just a few hours after the ceasefire was announced, Israel launched a massive airstrike on Lebanon. According to reports, hundreds of people died. 1,000 people were injured. Israel insisted that Lebanon was not part of the agreement, but for Iran, it meant something different. For them, this was a direct attack on Hezbollah, a group they support. Because of this, Iran may have seen the ceasefire as immediately broken. Aside from that, there are also reports that the U.S. offer may not be enough for Iran. This means that even without any other incidents, they still might not reach an agreement. And at that point, tensions were back in full force. According to reports, the U.S. plans to lift sanctions on Iran and reintegrate it into the international community. There is even a possibility of a partnership between the two countries. But for Iran, only one thing is most important: their nuclear program. For them, this is something they cannot give up. They also believe they hold the advantage because of the Strait of Hormuz. Because of this, They hope they can negotiate a better deal with the U.S. According to Vice President J.D. Vance, the U.S. already gave their best and final offer while the talks were in Pakistan. But there is one big condition. Iran needs to stop its uranium enrichment program. And that's where the problem started. For Iran, accepting this is like admitting defeat. It's a humiliation they can't accept. In the end, pride was the root of everything. Iran doesn't want to look like they surrendered, and the U.S. doesn't want to back down until the nuclear program stops. That's why we're here now. The U.S. knows that the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's strongest card. So they turn the tables. Instead of Iran taking control, the U.S. will be the one to set up the blockade. According to Trump in an interview, he believes that Iran will return to the negotiating table and that it will give everything America demands. Not 90%, not 95%, but everything. Now, a dangerous game is beginning at sea. A naval game of chicken where neither side wants to back down. The U.S. will send warships to enforce the blockade. This is a tactic that Iran itself used before with fast boats and drones. This is the big change. The U.S. is taking control, but there's still a big question. How will this blockade actually work? Preparations have already begun. The U.S. is already sending ships into the Strait of Hormuz. They're not directly part of the blockade yet, but it's clear that's where things are headed. Right now, what they're doing is a mine-clearing operation. They're trying to remove the sea mines to make the passage safe. 2 destroyers are currently in the area. The USS Frank E. Peterson and USS Michael Murphy. Both are Arleigh Burke class with advanced radar systems. They can detect and counter drones and missiles. The USS Santa Barbara might also join, and the USS Canberra. They carry helicopters that can detect mines near the surface of the water. Under the leadership of CENTCOM, the operation is gradually being formed. And as this happens, the situation is getting even more intense. According to a report on April 12, the Jerusalem Post said that the U.S. MH-60 helicopters are carrying special equipment. This is the AQS-235 Airborne Mine Neutralization System. These are unusual weapons. They are dropped into the sea like torpedoes. Afterwards, they move directly toward the mines. They're like disposable drones whose job is to destroy the mines. Their style is similar to kamikaze. They directly crash into the target until it's destroyed. But the situation isn't that simple. The U.S. is facing 2 major problems. First, Iran may have planted a huge number of mines. According to estimates,
nasa 2,000 hanggang 6.
And most of these can be deployed using small boats. This means it can be done quickly and secretly. It's possible that hundreds are already scattered in the sea, but no one can be sure exactly where, and this is where the second problem comes in. The U.S. says that even Iran no longer knows where they place the mines. If this is true, it becomes even more dangerous, because even the ones who made them no longer know the locations. It will be even harder for the U.S. to clear the passage. That's why what they're doing now is a search and destroy operation. They are searching for and destroying the mines one by one. The goal is clear: to create a safe route to Iran's main ports. This is the first step before fully implementing the blockade. At this point, the operation is starting. According to Trump, the blockade will begin on April 13th. And this is the big question now. How will the U.S. implement this? Because this will determine how big the impact will be on the whole world. Based on the plan, all ships that paid what is called Iran's illegal toll will be intercepted. They will not be allowed to proceed. The interception will be carried out by warships positioned near the exit of the strait. They will be on guard there. That is where they will wait for the ships. And that's where the real tension at sea will begin. The U.S. will likely also deploy aircraft to monitor the strait. This includes Apache helicopters and A-10 Warthogs. They will circle in the air to monitor the passing ships, especially those commercial ships that might be heading to Iran. The AIS, or Automatic Identification System, is also a big help. This is the system that shows the location of the ship using a signal. If it's turned on, it's easier for the U.S. to identify them. But if the ships turn this off, monitoring will be more difficult. Now it's clear, the exit of the strait. But what about inside the strait itself? According to the BBC, the U.S. blockade has a basis. This comes from the Naval Operations Law Handbook of 2022. According to this, a naval blockade is a military operation. Its goal is to prevent any ship or aircraft from entering or leaving the target area, even if the country is allied or neutral. This means the U.S. plan is serious and has a wide scope. Their target is Iran's ports inside the strait. Even the coastal areas where small boats can be launched are included. One of the most important targets is Bandar Abbas. This is one of the largest ports of Iran in the area. The U.S. might also focus on Hormuz Island and Larak Island. According to Al Jazeera, these two islands are like gatekeepers. If these are controlled, it will be easier to control the strait. But instead of a ground operation, it is more likely that an airstrike will be used. It's faster and less risky for the troops. Another target is Asaluya. This is the gateway to Iran's South Pars gas field. This is a major part of their energy supply. And most importantly, Karg Island. Almost 90% of Iran's oil exports pass through here. If this gets blocked, the country's revenue would almost come to a stop. But there's a challenge here. These places are still inside the strait. That means the U.S. needs to take control first. These are close entry points before they can fully reach the inside. Now, what about other countries like ships from Saudi, UAE, and others? According to the New York Times, CENTCOM has made a clear decision. They will not block ships that are not headed to Iran. This means the strait is still open for global trade, but it's closed for Iran. This is where the strategy becomes even clearer. They're not shutting down the world. They're only stopping one target. This should be a big relief for the countries in the Gulf region. But it doesn't mean they're already safe. According to James Kraska, there's still a risk. He's an expert in international maritime law. He said that even if a ship isn't the target, it can still be intercepted. Because of the law of war at sea, when there's a conflict, both sides have the right to inspect any ship, especially if it's passing through disputed waters. And this includes the Strait of Hormuz. This means that even if the ship isn't headed to Iran, it can still be stopped. It can be checked and it can be delayed. And it's not just the U.S. that can do this. Iran can also retaliate. They can also impose their own blockade to stop ships from passing through. So even if they say the strait is open, it's still not safe. Legally, both the U.S. and Iran have grounds for what they're doing. Both of them are considered belligerents. This means they both have the right to take such actions under international law. The ships of other countries are called neutral, and because of that, they are the most affected, because they can be stopped by either side. So even if this is legal, it doesn't mean it's easy. And this is where the real problem comes in. It's not just about the law. This is already war. And there's one big thing that can't be ignored: Iran itself. All of the U.S.'s plans are flawed. They're based on the assumption that the operation will go smoothly. Warships will enter and stand guard, and they will try to stop Iran. Simple on paper, but not in reality, because the U.S. ships will become targets. And not just targets, but easy targets, because they need to stay close to Iran's coastline, and that's where Iran is strongest. On April 11, something already happened, even before the blockade was announced. When U.S. ships entered the strait, Iran reacted quickly. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, immediately issued a threat. They said there would be a strong and direct response to any attempt to block the strait. Not only that, according to Iranian media, they sent a drone, and because of that, the U.S. destroyers were forced to withdraw. Whether it's true or not, the message is clear. Iran will not allow itself to be easily controlled. And at this point, the blockade is no longer just a strategy. It has become a direct confrontation. It's still unclear how true Iran's claims are. But one thing is certain: Iran wants to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a kill box. That means a place that's extremely dangerous to enter. Anyone who enters could be hit at any time. A big part of this are the mines they've placed. But that's not the only problem. There are drones, there are fast boats, and these are harder to control, even if the U.S. blocks the main routes. Iran's main forces. It can't stop the small boats. It also can't easily find the drones hidden in different places. This is where the situation becomes complicated. That's why even if the U.S. warships are ready for defense, the safety of other ships is still not guaranteed. And remember, CENTCOM said they will allow other countries to pass, but if there is still a threat from Iran, commercial shippers will lose confidence. One possible solution is to provide an escort. A warship will accompany each tanker, so there will be protection while passing through. But there is a trade-off. If they do that, the forces at the blockade will be reduced. The blockade against Iran itself will be weaker, and that's not the only problem. Before Operation Epic Fury, up to 138 ships pass through the strait each day. That's a lot, even with an escort system. It's hard to watch over all of them. Some will always slip through, and just one successful attempt is enough. Iran's attacks, even just one, to scare the ships, and if they pull back, the flow of trade will stop. This is where the U.S.'s actions become a gamble. The risk is high, but the possible reward is also high. For the U.S., the priority is clear. Iran should stop, even if it means sacrificing the smooth passage of ships from other countries, because if the blockade continues, Iran's economy will collapse. If the oil tankers can't get out, the income will stop. And that's the real target of the U.S., to remove Iran's leverage in the Strait of Hormuz. Because right now, Iran is still earning from the high price of oil, a price they themselves raised because of their own blockade. And now, the U.S. is trying to cut that off, according to Bloomberg. Iran is earning a lot from oil. Between March 1 and March 23, their exports reached 1.6 million barrels per day. That's equivalent to around $139 million every day. That's a huge amount of money. And in 1 month, more than $4 billion could be lost. For an economy that's struggling, this is a huge blow, especially after the damage from Operation Epic Fury. That's why the U.S.'s target is clear. It's not just military pressure, but also economic pressure. Through the blockade, they no longer need to send ground troops. They're directly squeezing Iran's income. And there's another effect. Those tankers that pay tolls to Iran, reportedly up to $2 million per ship, will have no reason to pay anymore. If the U.S. is just going to block them anyway, the payment is useless. Iran's revenue system is gradually eroding, and that's what America wants. Put Iran in a position where it has no choice but to negotiate and accept the agreement regarding the nuclear deal. If this succeeds, the situation will be reversed. But this also doesn't come without a price, because the blockade has an effect on the whole world. It was felt immediately. The price of oil went over $103 per barrel. It immediately increased after Trump's announcement. And it's not just Iran that will be affected. Even big countries like China and India, they are the main buyers of oil from this region. When the supply is affected, they immediately feel the impact. And it's not just about the economy, there's also a possibility of greater tension. It could lead to legal disputes or even worse, conflicts, because Iran doesn't just give in to pressure easily. Their decisions aren't just based on money. It's also about ideology, and that's what makes the situation difficult. There's another question. Who will help the U.S.? According to Trump, there are supposed to be allies, but it's still unclear who they are. And some have already backed out. The United Kingdom has said they won't join. That means the support isn't that strong. There are still many things that aren't certain. But one thing is clear. We're about to see how this will play out in real life. At this point, there's an unexpected factor that could affect the fight. Not as a direct force, but as a source of new tactics. Ukraine. They won't be sending ships. They can't do that. But they have other ways to influence the fight. Ukraine barely has a navy at all. And the few ships they have are still busy fighting Russia. So they can't help at sea. But they have one thing that's really powerful: drone expertise. And this is where they become important. In the years of war, Ukraine has become an expert in using drones. Not just simple flying, but advanced tactics. They use them for surveillance, attacks, and even for coordinating entire operations. In fact, in modern combat, nearly a majority of targets are hit by drones, and not just one by one. They can now use drone swarms. Many drones attack the target simultaneously. They also have the capability to use kamikaze drones, drones that directly crash into the target to destroy it. They're cheap but effective, and most importantly, they're quick to deploy. In some operations, they even use drones to attack distant targets, even without direct human presence. And according to reports, they're also using ground robots. This means it's not just in the air, the fight on the ground is automated too. Now, why is this important to the U.S.? Because the problem in the Strait of Hormuz is the same: small, fast, and hard to detect targets. Fast boats, drones, mines. The exact kind of threats that Ukraine has been facing for a long time. That's why their experience could be helpful. For example, how do you detect a small drone? How do you destroy it quickly? How do you use low-cost drones to counter the enemy? And how do you set up a layered defense? But there are also limitations. According to experts, not all of Ukraine's tactics can be copied in the Middle East. The terrain is different. The area is smaller. The targets at sea are closer together. The pace of the battle is faster. That's why the strategy still needs to be adjusted. In short, Ukraine will not send a ship, but they can provide knowledge, technology, and tactics. And in modern warfare, sometimes that's more important. And this is where one question becomes even deeper. When the fight is not just about strength, but about strategy. Who really has true control? Because at this point, it's not just about ships and missiles anymore. It's also about the speed of adaptation and the ability to learn from other battles, and even the use of simpler tools to counter stronger systems. Now let's imagine a scenario. What if Iran doesn't attack directly? What if they deliberately choose to prolong the fight? Not to win immediately, but to wear out the enemy. In this setup, every day that the blockade lasts comes with a cost. Not just in fuel, not just in operations, but in attention, in focus, in resources. And as it goes on, it becomes harder to maintain this kind of pressure. This is what's called a war of endurance. It's not about who has more bullets, but about who can last longer. And this is where the situation becomes interesting. Because even though the U.S. controls the sea, it doesn't mean they control the course of the battle. If Iran chooses not to match the speed, but instead to slow everything down, they can change the dynamics. Not with one big attack, but with a series of small moves. Moves that aren't enough to cause a major conflict, but enough to keep the situation from ending. And when that happens, the blockade goes unnoticed. And that pressure becomes a burden as well. Now, there's another angle to consider: its effect on the decisions of countries that aren't directly involved. As the tension drags on, more countries are forced to adjust. They're not part of the conflict, but they're affected. And because of that, they need to come up with their own strategies, find alternative supplies, change routes, conserve resources. And in the process, they learn not to rely on just one place. This is the subtle effect. While the two countries are fighting, others are learning how to survive without them. And in the long term, this could be what changes the entire system. Not because of a single fight, but because of the gradual change in the world's attitude. Now, in the end, we return to a simple idea. This fight isn't just about who is stronger. It's not just about who has more ships, but about who knows how to adapt better as the situation changes. Because in modern warfare, victory isn't always decided in a single big battle. Sometimes it's about who can hold out longer without giving up. As the situation continues, it becomes even clearer that this won't end quickly. This isn't a sudden battle with a quick result, but rather a long process where every move affects the next. With each passing day, it slowly becomes clear who can endure and who will be forced to retreat. That's where you measure who is truly prepared, not by the strength at the start, but by the ability to keep going until the end. No,